Barbara Hodgdon is one of our most creative residents here at Valle Verde, and I am pleased to introduce her here today in a completely different way from the last time you heard her speak. It was back in 2014 that Barbara discovered and became passionate about an unusual and little-known photography technique known as sculpting with light photography. It was only a few years later that Barbara called herself an artist. She was, before that, just, quote, a photographer. This photography technique begins in a completely dark room with only one tool, a small LED flashlight, that's spelled LED, with a diffuser on it that softens the light. Barbara will tell you a little bit more about the technique she uses, which is actually a painting technique. The light is painted, in quotes, on the subject of the work of art. And with the camera on a tripod, multiple images of the same subject are taken, the difference in each image being where and how the light strikes the subject. The final photograph will generally consist of anywhere from 3 to 30 component images, all identical except for the lighting that has been applied. Finally, all the component images are brought into Photoshop as layers where they are blended and masked to ultimately create the final image. Okay, yes, thank you. The final image, I hope you were able to hear a little bit.
Oh, there it goes again. I think it's better for you to hold it at the door. The guy's on his last leg.
Okay, only a couple more sentences. Barbara will tell you more about this fascinating technique. Now please welcome Barbara Hodgdon today as the second speakers from within the Life Enrichment Program. Barbara, please welcome Barbara.
Thank you so much, Mary. Let me see. I'm already disorganized. My notes. Anyway, I appreciated that nice introduction. And I thank you all for coming. I appreciate you all coming to listen to me talk about my passion, which is this kind of photography that I've grown to love so much. Before we start, a couple of housekeeping items. One is that this room is equipped with T-coil. So if any of you are wearing hearing aids that have that capability, you might want to turn your hearing aids to that fact. I learned yesterday from Miguel that the strongest part is if you're sitting on top of the wooden, and almost everybody's on top of the wooden floor, not over where the carpets are. I guess there we go. The quality is not so good. Also then, just a suggestion to turn off cell phones at this point in time. I have a jam-packed 1-hour program for you, which I hope will be very, very interesting. Basically, it's divided into 4 sections. We're going to start with a section which answers a question that many of you have asked of me, and that is, how in the world did you find this unknown kind of photography that you've become so passionate about? And so I'm going to start the program by sharing a little movie that I did for the Camera Club several years ago when I was talking about painting with light. So the movie is titled Painting with Light, My Journey. But what I want to clarify for you that sculpting with light is also painting with light. Painting with light has certain rules, and I'll be going over that. But there are many different techniques that photographers use, using those basic rules and then adding some rules of their own. Anyway, after we answer that question, then I'll move on to talking about why I feel that this photography is magical. And you'll notice that I used the word magic in all capital letters in the title. I really do feel that the technique brings a kind of magical quality to photography that you don't find in other kinds of photography. From there, I will do a hands-on demonstration here, showing you how I actually do the work, and following that will be the post-processing, how I go into the computer and take the elements that I get and put them together. And then we'll conclude with Cherished Belongings and Their Stories, which is the project that I did last year, and probably of all the projects that I've done using this technique, this was my very, very favorite. So it's a 4-minute slideshow at the end. And hopefully we'll fit it within 1 hour. It may run over just a little bit. Anyway, I think that's it for now. Let's just get started. So we're going to turn the lights off. We need to have the lights down for the images to actually show at their best. Thanks, Tracy. Anyway, before we leave the topic, I really want to emphasize two things. They were both mentioned in the slideshow that I just saw you. And one is the fact that after taking the 2 classes at City College back in 2007, a friend suggested to me that I should join the Channel City Camera Club, which I did. And that was just an amazing, that is really the way that I learned photography, was in that club. It's a club that was started in 1939 here in Santa Barbara, and it has been active all 83 years of its existence. And it's got some fine, fine photographers in it. We have 2 of the finest photographers in the club that live here, Walter Nauman and David Austin. And the club has had a long relationship with Valle Verde. I know when I was on the board some years ago, we used to meet in the Santa Barbara room. And then a few years later, when I was asked to develop a special interest group and teach the technique of sculpting with light, we were able to meet once a month on Saturdays in the boardroom next to the concierge. But before the last 3 years, the Camera Club has been on Zoom completely. But before that, we always had our annual banquet here in our dining room, and then the awards ceremony would take place in the room we are right now. Now, I don't know how far back, how many years that goes back, but a long time. Now, the good news is that the Camera Club is planning to come back to a hybrid mode before the end of this year. And it is planning to have program night here at Valle Verde. And everybody is invited to attend as a guest if the program is of interest to you. I can't tell you at the moment what date that's going to start, but it will probably be within the next 2, 3, or 4 months. As we get the clarification, then we'll put information in the newsletter with the content of what the program is. And again, if you're interested, please come. Now, back on the back table, I put a little clipboard, and if anybody wants more information about the Camera Club, you can stop by afterwards and indicate whether you want to be able to access the Zoom meetings that are currently going on. The club meets 3 times a month on Tuesdays, or if you want to get the monthly newsletter. Okay, then moving on. Oh, I didn't do my job. I was supposed to bring that up. Moving on, the second thing that I wanted to just emphasize a little bit more was the amazing training I got when I flew back to Pennsylvania and studied with Harold Ross. Harold had been a photographer for 30 years, specializing in photographing food. And he found that the standard lighting equipment just didn't work for many of the things he was trying to achieve. And he found that a little flashlight made a big difference. And out of that grew this whole technology of sculpting with light. And that's all he does these days. He's become quite well known. I don't know if you can see this or not. This is a lens work, which is a quite well-known publication within the photography world. Did a monograph on his work. And this is the only copy I have, but you're welcome to come up and take a look at it. I will probably be referencing him throughout this talk as I describe some of the techniques. Oh, to be old. Okay, let me go back and give some definitions. I talked about painting with light being a category. It's just like a category like landscape photography or tabletop photography or street photography or portrait photography. There are many different kinds of photography. But within painting with light, there are 2 basic rules, 2 basic principles. One is the photograph needs to be taken in total darkness. And the second is the light source. It can be a number of things, but the light source needs to be moving. Unlike traditional photography where the light source is static, within painting with light, the light source needs to be moving. Now that light source can be one of many things in painting with light. It can be a candle, it can be a sparkler, it can be a string of Christmas tree lights. There are lots of different things it can be. It can be a flashlight. However, for sculpting with light now, there are two other things. One is that it uses a small, and I'm going to show you these in a minute, but can you see my fingers, how small that flashlight is? It uses a very small LED flashlight to light the subject. And it has what's known as a diffuser on the end, and I'll be getting into that in a moment too. And what happens is that translates the light of the flashlight into a very soft light, and we'll be talking more about that. The other thing is that a sculpting with light photo is not just a single image. It is a group of images. The camera has to be on a tripod, but it takes the same photo over and over again. The difference is, as Mary mentioned in the introduction, the difference is the way, number one, where the light is applied and how it's applied. So, and then you may take, I don't think I've ever taken a sculpting with light that was less than 5 images. And generally I don't take one that's more than 30 images. I have on one occasion gone up to 40. But nevertheless, you take all those images into Photoshop, which is a software, and I'll explain a little more, and I'll try not to get too down in the weeds. But anyway, so sculpting with light is a category within the bigger picture, which is the painting with light. Now, let's move on. Okay, so why do I use the word magic in capital letters in the title? Because I really do believe that there's a magical quality to this technique. And there are many facets of that quality. First and foremost is light. Of course, all photography, light is one of the critical components. You take a picture of a sunset a little bit too early, you take a picture of that sunset a little bit too late, if you hit it just right, you may have an exceptional photo. So in all photography, the lighting component is a very important one, but it is especially so, I think, in sculpting with light. First of all, it's the quality of the light. First of all, it's the quality of the light. Secondly, it is the control of the light. And lastly, it's the fact that there is so little equipment needed in the first place. Okay. Speaking of the quality of light, there are two unique things that I think are unique about sculpting with light. First of all, it's a very soft light. And secondly, it's a very saturated kind of light. And let me go into that a little bit more. Okay, I've talked about the small LED flashlight with a diffuser on the top. So in this picture, you see the flashlight and you see the diffuser. But now let me explain. What happens for this is the light comes straight up the camera, but it hits this curved area here. And I'm not going into the physics of it, because this is to be a simple talk, but basically what it does, it scatters the light. So when it comes out the end of the diffuser, it is not the straight, hard light, but it is a much softer light. Here I am, standing about 6 inches from a wall. I have the flashlight. I've got my clicker here, but we'll pretend it's a flashlight. I have my flashlight in my hand, and I'm holding it steady and the wall. And look at the edge of the light. You can see the hard edges. It is a much more intense and, how should I say it, a harder light. Now I've put the diffuser on the end of the flashlight. So now I'm holding the flashlight upright, but it's got this curved diffuser on it, which then, so my hand is in a different position in this photo, but then the diffuser, the light comes up through the diffuser, and look what's happened to the light. It's become a much softer light. And then as you move your hand around, you get much larger areas of that soft light. So that softness is really one of the key components of the lighting that is used for sculpting with light. The other aspect of the quality of the light is the saturation of the light. My experience is that I don't know if there's a way to actually define why it works, but I have my own theory. And I think the reason so much of the painting with light images come out so saturated is because you're putting on layer after layer after layer of light. I saw this particularly when I was working, I don't know if you remember the photo of the tree that had a blue trunk and a great big orange canopy. It was in the slideshow. Anyway, when I was doing that, I had a blue gel on the front of a tactical light at that point, and that was at the beginning of my career with this stuff. I would be painting, for example, the trunk with this blue gel on it. I could not even see blue, but I would go over and over and over it. And when I saw the image that I had at the end, I couldn't believe how blue it was. So for me, the saturation, I think, is a result of the layering of the light. Next, let's talk about control, the control of the light. And the first example I want to give you is of transforming this piece of metal, which is in the shape of a round, but it has no depth. It's flat. So it's a flat, round piece of metal. But now look what happens. Changed it completely, didn't it? It's become now a ball. It has a third dimension. And that is because of the way the light was applied to that round, flat object. It was just the way the light was applied that transformed it to something that was round, to something that was, we still use the word round, but it's a ball. It has the third dimension. And there's some special techniques that I learned from Harold Ross in terms of doing that. This was one of my practice images. There are 10 pieces of fruit on that plate. And when I was making this photo, I dedicated one photo for each piece of fruit as I tried to work to make, of course the fruit is round to begin with, but as I worked to try and make it look even more round. So, for example, you can see the mango and the light, and then it falls off. And as the light falls off, that gives the feeling, because when you point light at something, when you're quite close to it, it's much stronger. But if it's farther away, like the sides of the fruit are, then it appears to be less bright. So here, then I did this with just the pear. I did it back here with the orange and back here with the apple and all the rest. I was more successful on some of them than the others, but it was a practice thing, and I think it kind of illustrates how you can take something round and make it look even more round. And for me, that's magical. Going back to that flat piece of metal, now the Harold Ross, these are his images. Harold Ross now has zoomed in, and basically what we're trying to do here is to look at a technique to bring out detail. So can anybody read what's in the middle of that? Anybody? It's well, hopefully. Okay.
Pretty poison food.
Okay. Some on the front row maybe can get it. All right, now we're using a technique called raking the light. And in raking the light, instead of putting, most photography is shot straight on. I mean, sometimes we do other things, but it's not shot at a very low angle. Let me stop talking a minute and see if I can illustrate this. That's sort of the typical where the lighting is. For the raking with light, I'm very off. If that's the subject, I'm way off. So in raking the light, what you're trying to do is create shadows, and it's by which you can do by being at a very small angle to the subject matter, and that brings out detail. Now more of you can probably read what that one says.
Not for food.
Not for food use, may poison food. So you certainly want to be able to see it. Anyway, that's another example of the kinds of techniques that are taught for sculpting with light. Now this is a photo I did, I think it was in 2014. I've always loved this photo, but it was dependent on using the raking with light technique. I worked this photo from all angles, but at a low image, or at a low angle. The items themselves belong to my husband's grandfather, and they are Civil War era powder horns, and they're beautifully etched. And I wanted so badly to be able to capture the detail in these three powder horns. And as I say, this is one of my favorites. I was really proud of the fact that I was able to bring out that detail. But that is part of what I consider the magic of the sculpting with light technique. And here's one more example. This is a single image, just shot from in front. It's one of the cherished belongings items that I was loaned by Kay Nauman. And it's lovely. And I knew, though, when I saw it for the first time, that what I wanted to do, I wanted to highlight the man, the woman, and the doe. And because of sculpting with light, the technique allowed me to do what I envisioned, which was this. So it brings out the main parts, or the main focus of that sculpture, and allows the foliage at the top and the rocks at the bottom to really fade into the background. And it really creates quite a different. And if I remember, in fact, I made a note here, that one, this image is actually 8 layers. And I used, the little LED flashlight to paint differently lighting, as it doesn't take much to do it. A little 3.5-inch flashlight. That's my flashlight with my initials on it. This little flashlight, Harold Ross actually studied a number of flashlights looking for one that had a true white LED, and this was the one he recommends. It also has 3 powers on it, low, medium, and high. I almost always work in low, which is the softest of all, but nonetheless, that's the flashlight. And over here are the diffusers that I'm going to talk about. But I'm going to take the other phone and so I can hold them up. Can you hear me? No? Mm-hmm. Oh, there we go, I think. Yeah. There we go, okay. Now let's see if you can see these, because we're working in the dark. This one, hold on. Sorry. Need my little clicker. I brought him up already. Okay. This guy is about 10 inches long. And Okay, this is a diffuser that is about 10 inches long. I don't use this one very often. Basically, I use it to do the template. And I'm not going to explain that right now, but I will while I'm doing the demo. These are the workhorses down here. And basically, this is a right-handed one, and when you're shooting from the right-hand side, and this is the left-hand one. Now, I've turned them in one direction, and one of them is laying in the other direction purposely. You always want the outer edge with the black one here to be on the side of the camera, because you don't want any of the light coming toward the camera directly. You want it to be reflected off whatever the subject is. But this one then shows how the interior of the light of the diffuser is white, and therefore it helps with the reflection of the light that's coming up the tube and then hitting the rounded section, and it's getting scattered as it comes out and becomes soft. I'm right-handed, and I do most of my work from the right-hand side, but I also use the left one when I need to get in for a detail on the left-hand side. But the interesting thing is, all the equipment that you need, lighting equipment that you need for this photography technique, will fit in half of a shoebox. You'd have to cut it, put it in the middle and cut it in the middle, just to accommodate this 10-inch guy. But the flashlight and all the diffusers and all the photos that you've seen so far were done with this little LED flashlight and mostly just this guy. This one I use for two things. One is called the template, which I'll explain later, and it's also used for large backgrounds, which I can no longer do, and I'll explain why that is. But anyway, that's the total equipment, so it's a very little equipment. You don't have to schlep around all kinds of other stuff, anyway, I'm missing words right now. But in camera equipment you have lights, and then you have reflectors and all kinds of equipment, and that can take up a lot of room. So you don't have to deal with that. You just have to have like a half of a shoebox full of lighting equipment to do the work. Okay, in addition to what we've just gone over in terms of light and the quality, the control, and the fact that there's so little, there are a couple of other things that sculpting with light is known for. And one of those is bringing new life to old things. Here's an example. This is from Art Ayres. And this was his cherished belonging. And when he told me what he wanted me to photograph, I hadn't a clue what he was talking about. Head gaskets. Ladies, how many of you know what a head gasket is? Oh, I see a couple of hands. But I don't see very many, and I know there are a lot more women in the audience. Well, we know what a gasket. I had no idea what a gasket was. But anyway, what Art has told me is that these are pieces of metal, sort of a soft metal that is used when you're rebuilding an engine. And apparently, in his younger years, Art had a buddy, and the two of them liked to find old cars and make them work again. So he rebuilt a number of engines, but he kept the head gaskets as a memento of those memories. So anyway, in this picture now, I'm in the process of trying to figure out the composition. But look at the head gaskets. To me, they looked rusty. But Art says they're mostly just grimy with dirt and oil, grease, and things of that sort. But when I use my little light, my little magical LED light, look at what happened. I call it magic. It's also another thing that Sculpting with Light is known for is to be very painterly. take this little clown. This again was Kay Nauman's belonging. So I love this little clown. In fact, I asked her if I could paint that one in addition to the one she'd chosen because I thought he was so cute. Anyway, I've been using a lot of satin fabric because it's small and I have just one box to put all my equipment in, and you're going to see my photo studio in just a moment. But anyway, I just combined him with some yellow satin fabric. I found a kind of narrow paper box, cardboard box, and I was able to pull the satin up over the back, and so I was able to have both a background that was colored as well as the ground level, so to speak. And yes, if you can't read that small print, several people, when this one was in the dining room, asked me if I had taken a picture of a photograph or of a painting. So I guess it's true that the sculpting with light does have a painterly quality. Okay, we're ready to move on. And before, though, we move on, what I want to do is show you my studio. Now, I will tell you that when I moved here about 11 months after my husband died. And so I had to do all the downsizing and selling of our house on my own. And that was during the early part of COVID. So that was not an easy task. I was terribly exhausted. And I was mourning still the loss of my husband. But I was also mourning the loss of sculpting with light in my life. I could see no way that I could continue to do sculpting with light. I only brought a few things with me because I did not anticipate it was going to be part of my future life. But though I live in a very small one-bedroom, the Galleria, many of you may live in that as well, the fortunate thing was about 3 months after I moved here, I had an epiphany. And I thought to myself, you know what, just maybe I can set up a little photo studio in my house. So let me walk over here and show you why it works. I'm still on. Okay, well the good thing is here's the hallway that connects the living room and the dining room, but you see that it's really a fairly short one. The problem with any hallway is it's not big enough to put a tripod in. And you've got to be able to walk around the tripod in order to make settings on your camera, etc. So the hallway opens onto my living room here, and back here, the back door that goes to the patio, a sliding door, it opens onto the bathroom and it opens onto the bedroom. So I have room to work. So what happens is, first thing I do when I'm setting up the photo studio is I hang a black curtain over the vertical blinds that go out on the door that goes out to my patio. Then I bring a little table that I bought from Amazon for about $20, which is probably less than a quarter of the size of the table that I used to use in my garage when I was doing this work. But I move it out and put it in front of the door. Now, I then come and set up my tripod here, where I can actually walk around it and make changes on the camera. And the camera then has this thing called a tether. It's a cord that actually connects the camera to the laptop, which sits on a little table that I bring in from the living room. And I stand, most of the time, because I like to do it from the right side, most of the time my subject is here and I'm standing here in the bathroom. I use a remote control to click the shutter. The shutter is the opening in the camera for those who are not camera people. To click it open, and then I should click it again to close the shutter. So I'm standing here the whole time. The image goes to the camera, which instantly sends it to the laptop. So instead of looking at a little image on the back of the camera, which is about that big, I actually have a good size image to look at. And that's really important for sculpting with light, because you're only lighting a component at a time of the image. And so the bigger screen makes a huge difference. All right, so that's my studio, and it's in my own home, which is a good thing. In the wintertime, I can probably start work around 6 or 6:30 in the evening. In the summertime, I cannot start work until about 9 or 9:30. And every image I make probably takes about 3 hours. So I have some long nights. I generally just do one image a night. So there's the little table. Underneath it is my tripod. And in this box is all my equipment, all my camera equipment, all my lighting equipment, all the fabrics that I use with are housed there. I have limited space. And as I said, I've now downsized to basically using satin because it folds up quite compactly. However, well, there I am hanging up the black photography curtain. Thank you. And that's the first thing I do. Then I move out the little table. No, I guess probably I do this next. Most of the time the setting up the studio is spent with my steamer, trying to get the creases out of the satin or whatever I'm using. Everything gets creased because it's all crammed in that one little box. Here we are looking down the studio. Toward the back door. One of the bad things for me is when the studio is in place, both my front door and my back door are inaccessible. Needless to say, I can move things out of the way so I can get in and out. But typically what I like to do is I like to work in 4s. I don't like for the studio to be up any more than 4 days. It's just in my way and underfoot. I can usually try and have 4 projects so that I can just bang one off per day. And that's looking the other direction up. And actually the camera has to be so far away from the table with the subject on it that I have to use a zoom lens. Okay, now the hands on, and we're going to leave the lights off. Hope this will work. I practiced it the other day and I think it will. But basically, what I'm going to be doing, now, when I do the demo, I'm using, well, here, I'll carry this over. Let me just carry this over. Can you see that?
Yeah.
That's called a wood plane. And this one actually came from our hobby shop. Sadly, during my downsizing, this is the tool that I've used to demonstrate sculpting with light for the last few years. But sadly, it disappeared. My kids took all the tools. My husband had a big workshop, had a lot of tools. And we haven't found it at their homes, and we haven't found it here. It just disappeared. But ours was just exactly like this one that I found over in the hobby shop. So that makes me happy because it enables me to continue to work with that tool that I am familiar with. Okay, so here's the original photo. This is the one I took back in 2014. And when we get into the post-processing, I'm going to be using the images, those original images, to show you the post-processing. But for now, just assume, you're going to have to pretend with me, pretend that I'm a tripod and I have a camera on my head. And I'm taking pictures of this. There's a cord running over here to my laptop, and then it would be giving me feedback as I do this. But what I'm going to do, although typically I use this little flashlight on low. I've got it turned to high in order to use it today because I want you to be able to see the light then as I apply it to the wood plane. I start with the one I use 98% of the time, and that's this little diffuser. So I'm going to put it on, but I'm going to set down mic here, and I'm just going to talk with my natural voice, but I'll try and talk very loud. Okay, now this is the bright light, but I'm going to just do a series of photos. I think when I practiced it, I did 8, maybe 9. Anyway, photo 1. I'm focused now on lighting just the front edge of the plane. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, I'm trying to light just the front edge of the plane. Okay, photo 2. I'm going up, I'm lighting the inner part. Of course, this would be very different with the light lower, but I want you to see the parts that I'm lighting. Okay, photo 3, I'm working on the knob. And I'm working the rounds, trying to get that round effect that I was demonstrating earlier. Photo 4, I'm working on the piece of wood that the plane is sitting on. Oh, I left out something important. I'll do it at the end. Okay, now I switch to the left-handed side. And here, I'm trying to get the innards here. And then I'm working, what was that, 6? I lost count. Okay, well, assume this is 7. And then I was working to get something from behind to try and bring out that shape of the back of that handle. And then trying to move this right along that edge to try and pick up that component, the back side. Now, the thing I left out, which is really important, and it's the thing that I ordinarily do first. But I guess when you're under pressure, you sometimes forget. Anyway, it's what I call the template. And the template uses this long, and it's much softer, so the light will not shine probably as well. But here, I'm just trying to light the entire subject with this. Now, I call it the template, but I also often refer to it as the coloring book. The concept here is this is taken in very low key, very low light. You don't want it to be strong. And then using the little ones, you bring out. And I'm going to show you, because we're going to go into the post-processing in just a minute. But that's, that then would be the demo. And I think hopefully you understand the components and you're putting together lots of components. Miguel, if I could have your help. It would probably take me 2 or 3 minutes to do what Miguel will probably be doing in about 15 seconds. But I have to get into a different program to show you the post-processing. And I'll go through this very quickly because I see we're getting close to the end. And I do want to get the cherished belongings. Thanks. Here's what I want first. Okay. Okay. Did I leave my little clicker over there?
I believe it's on the right-hand side of the table.
Thanks, Miguel. Okay, I always start with a black layer first. Then I add in what I call the template. This is the one I did from the top down with the 10-inch. But you can see it's quite dark. It's intended to be quite dark. Now we then start adding in the accent pieces that I'm going to fill in. More handle. The edge at the back of the handle. The inner, I call it the innards. The knob. Oh, let me go back. See that big red X? Can everybody see the big red X? On that side over here, these things are called masks, and they're very important parts of the post-processing. A black mask conceals, and a white mask reveals. So right now, I've taken the mask off. The X means that it's not doing its job. Now, the next picture is where it is doing its job. And look, all the material that was before, the light that shines in front and so on and so forth, I've gotten rid of all that. All I want is the light that's on the knob. So I put a mask on it and I paint a white area over the component that I want. Same is true in this image. Here, all I wanted was the very front, right here. I didn't want all the light that's over here. And there it is, with the mask on it. Now we have a white mask. Again, we're not using the mask at the moment. It's got the X through it. But if you'll notice up here, there's some light leakage that I just didn't want. But I wanted all of this. So I went in and I then just painted black on top of the white mask to get rid of the light that I didn't want. Okay, that's it. Oh, no, there's one more. There, did you see what happened? That edge just came up. Okay, now I'm going to do what I called the build. These were just showing you the individual pictures that I took. Okay. Okay, again, starting with the dark. Now this time what I'd like you to do is pay attention to this line right here. See that little white dot? That means that's the active layer. And then we're going to add these on top. So there's the template. Now we're adding in components. There's the handle with more at the top, the accent piece on the back of the handle, the innards, the knob, and the front metal part of the plane, the lovely wood underneath it, and the edge. And so basically, that's the final image. You go, if you get me back. Different, huh? Want to try it? It's not for everybody, I can guarantee you that. I think I'm one of those people that dots my I's and crosses my T's. You know if you are one. Okay, we're back where we need to be, I think. Okay, I forgot this part. We'll just skip this part in the interest of time. I think I've shown you the important parts. All right, so there's the image that I just took you through in terms of the hands-on demonstration and the post-processing. Oh yeah, let me go back to this. Okay, now it's my joy to 4 more minutes to share a slideshow of the project that I worked on last year. And as I've already mentioned, it's probably the most favorite project that I've done in a long time. Well, maybe ever. And there are 2 things that for me made it, well, first of all, I reached out to 25 people that I knew here at Valle Verde. Some I knew well, some I didn't know as well, and asked them if they had a cherished belonging, recognizing that many of us have already downsized many cherished belongings. In fact, just to make the move here. But usually what comes with us is something that really is special. And anyway, 22 of the 25 people had something that they considered a cherished belonging and were willing to loan it to me. So that's the good thing for me, was I got to know my friends better just because we were working on a project together. And the second thing that was wonderful for me is that it gave me some wonderful and very interesting things to work with, challenges in many cases, and I loved that. So I benefited from this project. But hopefully my goal and the people that participated have benefited as well, because my goal for doing this project in the first place was to encourage you, all of you actually, to write about the things that you cherish. I was a volunteer over at La Tienda when I first came here, in the kitchen corner, and I'd go over to kind of reorder the kitchen corner, and I'd be the only one there, and I'd have a chance just to slowly walk around and take a look at what was there. And there were some items that were there, and I'd think to myself, oh, if the family only knew the story of this thing, it wouldn't be in this thrift shop. It would have stayed in the family. So my goal was to encourage people to write stories about the things they cherish. Let family and friends know what is important to them. And the other thing that inspired the goal for last year is that back in 2016, when I discovered that Sculpting with Light was said to be bring new life to old things, I began looking around our house in terms of what we had that was old. Well, my husband found that he had a box of stuff in the garage that he hadn't opened in probably 40 years, and I discovered that there was a box out there that I'd inherited from my parents. Sort of the same story. Hadn't opened it forever, so I started digging through those things, and I found all kinds of interesting things to photograph. Which I did, and I did a slideshow for the Camera Club, as I do every year. But then I thought it needed something more, and I decided to write a story about why that item and the person that it originally belonged to, why did that person have that? So, for example, my husband's parents were archers. And they had we found lots of medals of their archery prowess. And so I wrote a story. I found a picture of my husband's mother in her archery outfit. So I put her picture there, and then I wrote a little story, just a little vignette that tied her to the photograph of the medals. Anyway, it was a really fun project. And I ended up with a book. Can you see the title here? A bit of family history through inherited things. So every item that I photographed, I wrote a story about and created this book. What I guess really the point I want to make is that a photograph is enhanced if there's a story that goes with it. Likewise, a story is enhanced if it has a photo that illustrates some component of it. The two are complementary, but when you put the two together, it's a much more powerful statement. Anyway, there's a copy of the book back there on the table, and there's a sign-up sheet if you'd like to borrow it and glance through it. I'm more than happy to, and then pass it on to anybody else that might be interested in it. Okay, now I'm going to start the video. maybe somebody could flip on the big lights back on the back? Okay, Miguel will get it. Anyway, I just wanted to say I'm ready to take questions, and I'll stay as long as you have questions. And secondly, I wanted to give a big shout out to Tracy. We all know our beloved Tracy in Life in Richmond. She's working from home at the moment, but she was here at the start. And of course, Miguel, who saved my life already a couple of times during the program, as well as getting me up and running. And then over there on the camera is a special man in my life. Marty Jenkins and I are old church friends from over 10 years ago, and we're now boyfriend and girlfriend. So he's been helping me with the practices, and he's also doing his best to record this in this total darkness. We'll see if we get anything or not. So if anybody has questions, I'm available. Don't forget there are 2 clipboards back there if you have any interest in either signing up to see the book or to get more information about the Camera Club. And thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, one more slide. Anybody who sits this long needs a thank you. Any questions?
Barbara, do you need a special camera to do this, or could you just do it?
Well, you couldn't do it with a cell phone. You need a camera that can be tethered, and you need a camera, well, in my case, I needed to have the zoom lens because of the situation. But not a high-end camera. My camera's pretty old, the one I use now. So I think, any camera that's got just the basics. Carrie was in the... Carrie Topliff, one of my friends, and she's in the Camera Club, and she's been doing some sculpting with light a little bit.
I have. It's
Yeah.
really fun.
And it's really fun.
It is meticulous.
Yeah, it is.
It takes time to do it.
Yeah. Laura?
Mom, what's kind of the maximum size object you can do with sculpting with light?
Well, sadly, when I was showing you the first, there were trees that were probably 5 times my
I
height.
was painting with light though.
Well, it was kind of a blend of both of them. Because I did multiple images, which is a key part of sculpting with light. But yes, I didn't have, I have a different light source because the thing is so enormous, but I had big
This
trees.
little light source with this camera, what's the biggest object you could do?
Well, it depends on the size. The table we had in our garage, I could do
I mean, it was a
big table. And I could do things that were a whole lot bigger than I can now because I'm limited to this little tiny table.
So you're not limited by the size of the flashlight. You're
No.
just limited by
Yeah.
You're always inside. Or can you work outside?
I love outside work. But when I was doing outside work, I really was dependent on my assistant, which was my husband, because some of the items were so big. But yeah, there's nothing like being out in the middle of the night in the darkness and just playing around with something you love. Yeah, I really love it. I'm not doing it anymore. And my balance is not as good as it was back in those days. We know, yeah.
Barbara,
Susie.
do you ever notice if a car goes by or if we have a very slight tremor, does that throw things off, or has that ever happened to you?
I don't think a tremor has ever happened to me, but yes, having a car go by when I was doing outside work. And sometimes it just destroys that image. You just have to wait until that car's gone before you, and take the image over again. Sometimes, it may be just in a corner and you can black it out like that one image I showed you. But yeah. Marilyn.
Are you going to do a display
Oh.
of cherished? I talked about that.
I love this cherished belonging, and you've seen my work, which is the images, but you haven't read the stories, and there's some wonderful stories. And I met with the Art from the Heart group last week, I think it was, and what I'm hoping is maybe in the fall, we can reserve probably the Santa Barbara room, and post the photos with the stories with them. And then maybe do an event with food. And I'm also contemplating doing a book, kind of like the book I did. That's back there, where you have the image on one page and the story right next to it. I think it lends itself to a book of that sort.
Well, I was a little confused about your slide number 1, which from here looked just black to me. You said that it was a photograph, but later you seemed to see an image on there. Of course, you couldn't make a photograph with
Yeah.
no light.
Right.
Was there an image on there that I couldn't see?
You know what
that you used?
what I do actually, generally I don't take a photo of the black. I just create a black layer when I begin to stack the images in Photoshop.
So
I always
there's no
want to,
image on there.
no, the black layer is not an image. It's just black.
Okay.
Because, well, I'm going to get in the weeds. We'll talk more about
Don't bother,
that.
that was my question.
I've tried to keep it simple for a general purpose audience. So any other questions?
I actually did have one other question.
Oh, okay.
Am I correct that all of your work is in color? Do you ever do black and white with this technique?
There are hardly any cameras now that do just black and white. You start with color and then you go through a conversion process to black and white these days.
And Photoshop doesn't do that?
You can do it in Photoshop, and then there are many other programs as well. But no, I do everything in color. I just stay with the color that my camera gives me.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you for coming.